you were a lesbian bootlegger from the 1930s on the show Cold Case. And
this is beginning to feel like a theme, just like a period lesbian, just a lesbian of the past, a lesbian of a bygone era.
Am I right that this is your first lead in a murder mystery?
This is my first lead in a murder mystery. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that until just now.
You're very intentional in the roles that you choose. I think that most actors are, but there is something that is very specific. I talked about it a little bit in the intro. There's a through line in many of your characters. Many of them are, of course, they're highly intelligent, but they're also deeply self-reflective and aware. They use control as a way to survive. Anna, this particular character in His and Hers, is no exception. And I actually want to play a scene where she's having lunch at a diner with a cameraman. His name is Richard Jones, and he's played by Pablo Schreiber. And he's married to your nemesis, another news anchor, which I should just say is really real. Like there's so many photographers who are married to news anchors.
It's so true. And there are also so many anchors that have some, testy relationships, which I learned when I did my time shadowing some of them.
Oh, you did? So you shadowed?
Yeah, I shadowed, which was, it's just such a delight. I did a ton of it in Atlanta, and I'm so grateful to all the folks there that were so generous with me. But, it's gotten better now, but it has been, for a very long time, a very competitive industry. And for women in particular, there is a scarcity of opportunity, which creates its own sort of drama.
Tessa, I want to know about this shadowing of local news anchors in Atlanta.
Yeah, local news anchors.
Did you go out on stories with them, or what was your shadowing like?
I got to go out on stories. They got to help me with my copy, so I would send my copy in the show. They would help me rewrite. I got to go in studio and watch them work. It's one of the great, extraordinary pleasures of what I get to do is to really in the process of preparation and research to meet so many extraordinary people that do incredible work, and to really get a window into worlds that I think I might know something about, but truly, like anything, you know nothing about it the closer that you look.
Oh, I'm so curious. What's something you learned that was a surprise to you about the job?
Something that was really surprising to me is I had always sort of assumed that anchors in particular were people that were just reading the news as opposed to writing it, that they actively are really, writing those stories and have so much to do with that. And then also just being in the room where they're deciding what stories are important or when something's breaking. I think just the immediacy sometimes of information, and truly that it's still going through a human kind of funnel and filter, which I had always understood, but I think to see it in real time maybe changed or sharpened the way that I engage with the news and with media. But, I had a similar thing just sitting across from you, because when I played Sam in Dear White People and got to play someone that worked in
a radio station,
I still, every time I do a podcast or I'm in a radio station, I have like a rush of that feeling again, because I just loved doing it. I just so enjoyed doing it. Sometimes when I play parts, this isn't always the case, but sometimes it feels like I get a sense of a window of like another trajectory I might have taken were I not an actor.
You also went to the small town that this was based on, or it was based on a small town, right?
Yeah,
in
so
Georgia.
It's set in this tiny little town called Dahlonega, and thankfully when I've had my first conversation with Will Albright about making the series, he said, I want to set it in this town, Dahlonega. I happened to be in Atlanta, Georgia, shooting the last Creed movie, and I literally got off the phone with him and drove an hour and a half to Dahlonega right away, because I just was so fascinated. I'd spent many months over the course of years shooting projects in Atlanta, but I'd never heard of Dahlonega. It was one of the early sites of the gold rush, this really fascinating tiny town. So I drove up there, and I was just so taken by it that I thought, I definitely want to make the show. And then when we were working on the show, we got to shoot there, and I got to spend increasingly more time there. But it is a rarefied thing to get to shoot in the place sometimes, and I think it's really a gift.
Right. When that happens, what are you looking for? When you drove there, what are the things that you're trying to suss out as you're trying to figure out the character that you're going to embody?
Trying to get a sense of the place. I mean, Dahlonega, I knew on paper was almost 98% white. But But then to be in Dahlonega and feel what that feels like, to come from Atlanta, which is this mecca.
Chocolate mecca.
Chocolate mecca. To go into Dahlonega, into that space, and be inside of a black body in those spaces, to feel what that is. I'm a great lover, probably because all the items that you find in these places are storied, but I love an antique mall. It is my pleasure, my heaven. And the best ones always exist in tiny towns. And Dahlonega is chock full of them. And so I went into one of these antique malls, and I'm, finding so many things I love at a steal, little ceramics and pieces of lace and all these things. And I turn one corner, and the whole stall is Confederate flags. It's all kinds of, some things I won't even say, but really sort of shocking bumper stickers and pieces of literature, and just kind of, challenging to see that in and amongst sort of all this sort of beauty and the quaintness of the store otherwise. But that's very real. When we were shooting His and Hers, there were so many neighborhoods we'd go into where there were tons of Confederate flags on lawns. And I think just having sort of the visceral experience of being in these spaces always feels important to me, and always in the process of preparation, just to touch down is a gift.
This is so fascinating to me because, right, you're building the scaffolding for the interiority of your character, who is this news anchor, who's a reporter. So she's been born and raised in this small town, and she's a woman of color. And so that gives you a sense of who she is, even if that's not part of the storyline.
Yeah, I sort of am of the mind that it all ends up on screen in some way that audiences can't even detect. And in some ways, the less that these things exist inside of the narrative or in an expository way, the more important it is as an actor and as people that are creating the world of these stories. It's more important to sort of do that real digging and make sure that it exists inside of either the performance or the construction, even and especially if it's not in overt ways. I sort of think you kind of have to double down even more. Or at least I like to. I don't know. I think it's always been my instinct, because I'm really curious. I studied cultural anthropology in college, so I was really interested in people. But I think also I early in my career was lucky enough to work with people that seemed to work that way, like Ryan Coogler. I remember when I made the first Creed with him, how in depth he likes to get about character, things that you'll never see reflected on the screen necessarily.
Like what? Yeah.
Oh my goodness. When we, spoke about Bianca for the first time, who's a musician, as you said, but we wanted her musical taste to feel incredibly varied. But she's a girl that grew up in Philadelphia. How would she have been listening to experimental music in the neighborhoods that she grew up in? And, he shared with me that one of the first times that he really heard like rock music, or music that was different than what he was listening to at home or with his peers, was when he was playing football and everyone would get to take their turn playing things in the locker room. And it so expanded his sort of musical taste, or he heard all these things that he wouldn't have heard for the first time. And so we decided for Bianca that maybe she went to a Quaker school. And so even though her neighborhood was mostly black and brown, at school she suddenly had all these kinds of different folks and influences and these sorts of things. There was never a scene where we expressly talked about that, but it gave us a sense of who Bianca was, or, we knew, her astrological sign. We knew he's a filmmaker that has an incredible appetite to build out the world of a character so that they feel so authentically real to him, and also that they feel like they resemble people that he knows and understands. And he wants to do that in a very robust way with an actor. And I think working with him early on in my trajectory and also early on in his set me free, in the sense that I understood, like, oh, this way of working that feels right to me and necessary to me is also a valid way of working. And it's a way that I think, particularly for a character like Bianca, that is sort of supporting and exists in a kind of film where you would think like, oh, maybe she's just the girlfriend, she's ancillary, that she gets to feel every time that she occupies the screen, she gets to feel like a woman that audiences know that they can recognize, you know. And so it's just been continuously the way that I love to work.
Well, this is so fascinating, in particular about Anna and his and hers. I have this clip that I want to play where, as I mentioned, she's sitting with this cameraman and he's married to her nemesis, and she's talking to him about the perils of being married to a news anchor. And she's talking about her nemesis, but she's also talking about herself in that same way. Let's listen.
Richard Jones, married to rising star Lexi Jones. It's not like exciting. Lonely? Right. Friends tell you it must be exciting to have a celebrity wife or what passes for a celebrity in Atlanta, but it's not, is it? People recognize her in the grocery store, ask you to take their photo. Next to her, you're invisible. She leaves at 2 for the 4 and the 6, and she stays for the 11. And then there's meetings after, so she doesn't get home until after 1. You're already asleep, so goodbye, sex. She makes 5 times more money than you do.
Oh, no.
Oh, and you're happy that she does. But it creates an imbalance, so happy or not, it hurts you both.
Okay, I love this scene because it also is so accurate. Sorry, I just was in this world for so long.
Yeah, right.
And, you know, there are often these shows that try to portray this world.
Yes.
And they never quite get it right. But this particular piece seemed to do that. But what strikes me the most is that she's talking about her nemesis, but she's also
Talking about herself.
She's talking about herself.
Yeah.
Take me to that scene. Take me to that particular piece of dialogue as well.
Oh, good. Well, I'm so glad that you said that, because it was something that I felt really protective over, both as a performer and then producerally. I was like, I want to try to get this world as right as we possibly can. So, as I said, I would lean on some of my, new friends who worked in the space to go through my copy, but also with that scene, as we were developing it, I also asked them, like, what feels right? And so I would send sort of drafts of it back and forth and get input from women that really work in that space. So I'm really grateful because a lot of their DNA is inside of it. Anna is someone who is newly back or trying to regain her footing in her professional world, and meanwhile is having to contend with a lot of choices that she made in her personal life. And so I think you get to see her in this moment. She's someone that deflects a lot and is probably projecting onto Richard, but really she is really talking about herself.
Okay, let's talk about Hedda. What fascinates me about this play, Henrik Ibsen, it was written in 1891. But what fascinates me is its persistence. It just seems that across generations, there is always this desire, this need to unpack it, to understand it in order to understand the moment that we're in.
Completely.
I'm just curious, what was it about Nia DaCosta's Hedda that really, aside from the fact that you two had worked together previously, you knew each other well, but her version of Hedda that fascinated you?
Oh my goodness, so many things. I mean, I think to your point, these pieces are ripe for adaptation because they're dexterous enough to handle them. They're so well constructed, and what they observe or wrestle with is something so universal and foundational to humans that you can take them apart and put them back together. But for my money, I always think if you're going to do a classic, you kind of have to implicate yourself. You have to have a good reason to want it, because they're so perfect. It's like, why take it apart and put it back together unless you have something,
To
say, or you want to take a big swing, or you want to do something daring, that both, satisfies the original material, but maybe takes it a step further or uses it in a way that pushes even the boundaries of what the original, writer was intending. And I think Nia did that in spades.
A couple of different ways.
Yeah.
Number one, I mean, casting you as Hedda is the biggest way.
Yes.
And I want to say there's a particular kind of rage within Hedda.
Mm-hmm.
But it translates a little bit differently with you being a Black woman.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that for you and how you kind of thought about that, how it kind of translated for you as you embodied that role, that restraint, that ability to be able to articulate that rage, but it come out in this very specific way that is so many different ways.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, you also add sort of the dynamics of upper society.
Yes.
Post-war UK that has its own sort of affect, Nia in general thinks of the 50s as the time of great pretending, sort of this post-war effort to button up everything. Women get back in the house, men get back to work, everything's okay. Never mind the trauma that is happening globally.
And the great pretending, it shows up in so many different ways in Hedda.
I mean, she herself is a great pretender. But when I was beginning work on her, I thought about my paternal grandmother, who was a Black woman in the 50s, a school teacher, so a working woman. But I thought about all the ways in which she and my maternal grandmother had to pretend. They took very different paths. One became a working woman, another married and was a housewife, never had a job in her life, was always attached to the men that she married, first one and then the other. And I understood with more clarity now, looking back on them. One is still alive. And to this day, by the way, she's almost in her 80s. She wears her red lipstick every single day. But I just think about how much I understood that they were pretending and how much rage they must have had because of the things that they were expected to do or the things that they could not do because of the time. And I think something that we were really interested in this adaptation is to, yes, create a world in which Hedda, as a mixed race woman, in society at that time, also as a woman who is queer, is hemmed in by the time, the expectations, but is also hemmed in by herself. And that, I think, is the thing that all of us understand. There are limitations that are put on us because of where we're from and who we are, and there are also the limitations that we put on ourselves because we are too afraid to step into who we are.
And that articulation comes through so clear in her queer relationship. Her ex-lover, Eileen Lovborg, played by Nina Hoss. And I want to break this down a little bit because she is a professional woman, Eileen. She is up for a professorship. She also is living a free life. She is in a queer relationship, and it is a healthy relationship. And your character, it almost as if like she is a show of what Hedda could be.
Exactly, which is exactly why Nia decided to change Eilid Lovborg, who is typically a man in the play, to Eileen Lovborg. It wasn't her intention necessarily to set out to make a queer story, but she wanted to create a real foil for Hedda, because in the original piece, Hedda is in a world of men. She's trapped inside of domesticity. She never leaves the house. Everything that happens off stage. She's not a woman of the world. Our Hedda is a woman of the world, and a woman who, has other choices that she could have made, albeit they'd have their own attendant challenges. But nevertheless, she could.
I actually want to play a scene where we get to see sort of the manipulation that Hedda navigates throughout the night. So in this scene, Hedda knows Eileen has stopped drinking. She knows she could lose control if she drinks, and she pushes her to do it anyway. Let's listen.
Drink something, you look thirsty.
I don't drink.
Eileen, one can't hurt.
She doesn't drink either.
Never. I thought you were just cutting back.
That's not what I said.
And if I say you have to?
Then you'd be speaking.
You wouldn't do as I say?
Not where that is concerned, no.
I think you should. It's ridiculous. It's silly.
Really?
It's all right for Thea, but not for you. You can write your books with them and teach with them at the university, and you might even be able to get jobs alongside them. But they'll never really respect you if they think you can't do it like the boys
Hedda,
do.
please.
You saw Greenwood's face earlier when you asked for a soft drink, like a soft woman.
What did you see?
Condemned.
I'm used to contempt.
Condemned for your extracurricular interests, yes, but for your mind, your character.
He can think what he likes.
A woman of principle.
What do you think Hedda actually might want from Eileen? And maybe, is it to destroy her? Is it to actually feel something in that moment with her? What is your interpretation?
Oh, goodness. I mean, I have a tremendous amount of empathy for Hedda having embodied her. I think, if I'm honest, I think in that moment, she's pretty dead set on destroying her. I think she's come from this attempt at vulnerability, which is to say, if we could have done things differently in the past, if we could have been together, which is basically her way of saying, could you have me now? Would you have me now? And she feels terribly rejected in that moment. And I think from that moment on decides, then I have to destroy you. And the truth is, I think, thankfully, we are conditioned to not give credence to those sort of dark impulses inside of us.
Yes, I've heard you say that you think envy gets a bad rap, and I want to know more about that.
I do,
yeah.
and actually the process of working on Hedda helped me understand that, because particularly in my industry, I did a lot of work early in my career because there's so much competition. And I really wanted to feel like I'm happy for people if something doesn't come my way, particularly for other Black women. I feel like I win every time someone like me wins. Like, really and truly, I feel that. I feel so deeply a part of that community. And yet, of course, in all of us, particularly when you want something, when you cannot have it, I think there's something inside of us that gets quelled from when we're children, and we're
told it's bad to feel that.
We're told it's bad. Yeah. We're told it's ugly. And particularly as women, we're told to feel that about each other is unsavory. And yet, I think understanding and being able to connect to moments of jealousy or envy actually helps us understand the lives that we want to live. It's that thing of like when we're scrolling on Instagram and we feel petty about someone's, I don't know, job that they post or recent weight loss or engagement. I think what they help us understand is maybe I'm not in the job that I want to be in. Maybe I want to be someone who's taking better care of myself. Maybe I want to be in a relationship that feels like it's moving towards, some new level of commitment. These are little, I think, whispers to ourselves. If we can channel it in positive ways, I think it can help us understand where we want to go and potentially how to get there. That's the healthy version. But I think these instincts that exist inside of Hedda exist inside of all of us. And I think we do a tremendous amount of pretending that they don't. And I think it actually gets us further away from our emotional truth.
Your first TV role before Veronica Mars, because people talk about Veronica Mars as your breakthrough role.
Yeah.
But before any of that, you were a lesbian bootlegger from the 1930s on the show Cold Case. And
this is beginning to feel like a theme, just like a period lesbian, just a lesbian of the past, a lesbian of a bygone era.
Well, gosh, you were so young.
I was so young.
And I thought, what a hell of a way to start.
Yeah.
But you talked about being drawn to characters that don't fit neatly, who, they cross lines, they resist categories. Where does that actually come from, though? I want to talk more about your childhood and growing up, but you go out and you audition, or whoever represents you says, oh, here's a role for you to go to audition for. But like this is a pretty specific role to say, like, I want to go for this, you know?
Yes. I mean, the truth is, early in your career as an actor, if you're someone like me that doesn't have any, folks in Hollywood in my family, I was like cold calling agents. I was like sending my little resume. I put together like a little collage and a handwritten note, and I would send it out to agents around town. I mean, it was like very scrappy in those early days. But I was also meanwhile doing theater, and so I would do these plays, and occasionally a casting director or somebody with proximity to the industry or in the casting process would see me in a play, and I would get early auditions based on that. And Cold Case was one of those instances. But, then you're just sort of throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. But I remember that Cold Case audition came after I'd had like a lot of commercial auditions, which I never had any luck at.
You never got one.
Oh, I'd be holding a pizza box, and I just found the whole process really challenging. I was not very good at it. It convinced me that I was probably not a very good actor because I couldn't do any of the things that they wanted me to do at these commercial castings. And also typically you'd be like one of like 85 people that look vaguely like you, just in like slightly different outfits. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to make it this way. But I remember when Cold Case came through, I thought, oh my goodness, this is so fascinating, because it aligned with so many of the things I already loved, and one of which was research. I was like, oh, I get to do so much research into the time. And then I remember when I got the part, I went to, I think it was on the Universal lot, got to go to their costume archives, and, the suit that I'm wearing in it is an actual boy's suit from that time, from the period. And I remember just thinking like, wow, if this is what it's like to work in TV and film, because that was my very first time doing it, I was like, I never want to stop. This is extraordinary.
This collage that you made with these little handwritten notes, that's something that is a through line that I see in a lot of the roles that you ultimately got. I mean, there's this story about you writing Tyler Perry. First off, you sent a tape to Tyler Perry for Colored Girls after you heard that the film was already cast.
Yes, I heard it was cast, but I knew, sadly, because I think she would have been extraordinary, Journey Smollett had to fall out of it. And so I got a call. I was in the supermarket at the time, I'll never forget. And I got a call from my then agent who said, Journey has to leave this. I know you love this play, because for Colored Girls, who considered Suicide When Rainbow's Enough is one of the first plays I fell in love with. I still have my hard copy that I stole, from the Brooklyn Library. I still own it. I'm so sorry to them. I will pay you whatever I owe you. But I just devoured that play and read it so many times and loved it. And so my agent at the time knew that and said, they're making a movie version of it, and there's a part in it for you. How soon could you send a tape? And I went home immediately from the market and recorded a tape and sent it to Tyler and sent him a note just about, I don't even remember what I said, maybe just how much I love the play.
Yes.
But yeah, that's how that came about.
I mean, for Colored Girls, it's a raw, poetic exploration of what it means to be Black and a woman in America. And you are alongside all of these titans. When you go back and watch it, Whoopi Goldberg, Kerry Washington, Thandie Newton, Felicia Rashad. What did you absorb being among them?
Janet Jackson.
Janet Jackson. How could I forget Janet Jackson?
Literally all of the women, I cannot tell you, all of the women I watched my whole childhood. I mean, had Journey been in the movie, she also would have been one of those, because I remember watching her in Eve's Bayou when I was, about that age, watching her on screen. I mean, so many of these women had such an incredible impact on me. I remember the first time I saw Thandie Newton in that film Gridlock, my dad showed it to me and was like, you got to see this woman. I mean, all of their work collectively. Janet Jackson, I was her for 3 times at Halloween. I used to know all of, very poorly, but the Rhythm Nation dance, I could do that as a child.
Wait, 3 times. So Rhythm Nation, and what other eras of Janet?
Rhythm Nation twice.
It's a good one. It's a good one.
Rhythm Nation twice.
Yeah. You've got the hair today.
That's true. I do have the hair today. I mean, I'm always trying to be Janet. But these women meant so much to me. And so being on that set with them was just, I mean, like pinching myself every single day. But also, I feel like I'm so deeply aware all the time of just how we're in relation to each other. You know, the women that both came before me, many of them still working today.
Absolutely.
The women that are working currently that feel like they're coming after me, the women that will come after them. I just spend a lot of time energetically feeling connected to Black women inside of this business, because I just know from watching, you know, film and television growing up that it meant so much. It shaped so much of my ideas of self, you know, seeing Black women on screen.
I want to talk to you a little bit about your relationship with director Nia DaCosta, because you've said something important about how so much of what you're able to bring to the lens, to your roles, has to do with the person behind the camera and their ability to see you. And what is that relationship, that trust? What do you think it is in Nia, just on a fundamental level? There are probably a million different attributes, but there's something that's a connective tissue that you feel like she allows you the ability to be expansive in who you are on screen.
Oh, goodness, so many things. I mean, we've become just the closest of friends, so there's definitely that. But I also think that she has a real vested interest in the same way that I do with taking Black female protagonists into all sorts of spaces. She already is interested as a filmmaker in being able to traverse across genre. That's just because her interests are so varied.
It's pretty expansive, just like you. I mean, you've gone from blockbusters, Marvel, to independent films, and her career trajectory is the same.
Exactly right. But I think a part of it is also that she hopes to then take Black female protagonists into all these spaces with her. And again, I don't think there's any Black women in the Bone Temple, but that's also amazing that she's a filmmaker that insists on not being pigeonholed, because so often what can happen sometimes to a filmmaker of color is that there's assumption that you're only going to tell stories about your experience and from your own cultural lens, which is fair and fine, and many filmmakers do that, and that's extraordinary. And also, you should be able to tell any kind of story that you want to, and I think that is the space that Nia exists in, which is to say that I want to center Black women in my stories, and I also, as a Black woman, don't want to feel like I have to be centered in any one space. I want to be boundless. I want to be able to go everywhere, to do anything. And I think that kind of ferocious appetite that has to do, yes, with her own interests, but also has to do in, like, where have we not been before? And particularly, where has a Black female director not been able to go before? Like, I want to go there.
I want to ask you about your parents, and in particular, your father, Mark Anthony Thompson. He's a musician. And I have so many questions I want to ask you about growing up with parents who were artists. But in particular, your father, he was always photographing you, always filming you. What do you remember? Take me there. What do you remember about being on the other side of his camera?
Yeah, he loved, he always had cameras, whether it was a Super 8 or a digital camera or a still camera. He loved images, still does, but then it was relentless. He was always recording. And he would use me to test light. And so he just sort of needed a subject, but then we graduated eventually, and I could use him as my cameraman and my cinematographer. So I would come up with these stories, and then I would tell him and sort of direct him, and he would shoot them. And some of them actually were quite elaborate. I cast my older sister very begrudgingly, who was deathly shy, just in general, but camera shy especially. And so she's in one of those early films that we made. I don't know. I think I remember a sense of feeling a tremendous amount of excitement and abandon. You know, I definitely was not a child that felt I was lit up by a camera's presence. It was actually later in life when I began working professionally that I had to build a new relationship with a camera. But then it's no self-consciousness at all, just an excitement and being able to capture. And then my dad would also, because we drive around Hollywood a lot, he would hand me the camera, so I would get to record a lot too. And I really loved that. I loved being able to see life through a lens. It made even the most mundane thing exciting suddenly to get to see it behind a lens.
That's so powerful because it makes me think about your ability to clearly see the people you want to work with and how you want to work with them. And if those foundational experiences with your father were pretty foundational in you understanding how it feels and what you need from the people that you work with.
Yeah, I hadn't even connected that, but you're so right, because I think obviously it's my dad, and there's such a kind of intimacy.
And trust.
And so there's absolute freedom. You're right. Maybe I'm always chasing that now.
He's a musician, chocolate genius. Really, he had several different arcs in his career as a musician, but I'm always fascinated by the neo-soul era because that was just a special era of a time when it was a bringing back of music in such an intentional way and musicality in such an intentional way. And I know that that's another form of storytelling for you. You did it in Creed, where you were a musician who was writing music, but also you wrote music as part of it. Can you talk a little bit about how music kind of plays into your storytelling as well? Do you see yourself as a musician?
I don't see myself as a musician, no, just because I know if anything, like it's requisite. It's sort of like an eat, sleep, breathe. It is your world, and music is not necessarily, but it has such a huge place in my world. And I think in terms of formative early experiences, a lot of those films that I would make with my dad or that time of creation was also at a time when he lived in his studio. So when I would be spending, because my parents weren't together, I would spend time with my father. And when I was spending time with my father, I was in Hollywood in this studio. So there were so many people coming in and out in creation, and I would be playing or watching a movie while my dad would be recording. And so there was this sense of constant music around and constant kind of creation. And I still work in a very similar way when I'm working on something. Music is a huge part of how I'm beginning process and character and understanding characters. There's so much that happens with sort of connecting kind of a sonic landscape with an emotional landscape.
So when you're preparing, are you using music or playing music?
Yeah, constantly. I'm using so much music. And
for
also,
Hedda, what did you use?
Oh,
what did you do?
Tons. A lot of Ornette Coleman, but tons. And usually I'm sharing music with the person that I'm working with, the director, and we're sending things back and forth. And I always want to know what people are listening to in every department, because typically people are using music too.
Yes.
So that becomes a part of my world. I want to know the people that are creating the literal world. What is their, what is their world like whilst they're creating? Like, that feels important to me. But I think it's just music is there's something about it that even in a way that film can't necessarily do, there's something about music that really, I think, sort of connects us in such an immediate way. So it's something that just matters a lot to me. But definitely watching my dad from an early time, because I think as a storyteller, as a songwriter, he is so extraordinary, and then also in his performance early, he really would create these sort of personas that felt like an exaggerated version of him. And so I think I did learn in those early times, watching him and watching so many of the musicians that I grew to love and be so fascinated by from a very young age, whether they're Prince or David Bowie or Grace Jones, or later, someone like Erykah Badu. I think folks that I could really sense when I was young were creating a sort of avatar, a version of themselves, whereby they were sort of free to challenge audiences and to expand our ideas of what's possible and who and what we can be in the most expressive and daring ways. And so I think that had a huge influence on me, for sure.
Your mom, you all are extremely close. And I want to read something that you said about her. It was at an Essence Black Women in Hollywood luncheon back in 2020. So you said something pretty poignant about your mother and your grandfather. And here's the quote. "I want to acknowledge someone who is not Black and is not in the room because she couldn't be. But it's my mother. Her father, my grandfather, was of Mexican descent. He was a performer in a time where there was very few of them, and he was the only very often. And I think because of this, he had a real pressure to assimilate because he didn't want my mother to speak Spanish." And I was just really struck by the fact that you wanted to acknowledge her in this room. You wanted to say the sacrifices that she made allowed you to be in that room, and also her understanding of identity in that way. How did your mother's experience actually help you hold on to the parts of yourself in this world as you navigate trying to pinpoint the storyteller you are?
Yeah. I mean, her effect was so extraordinary. Firstly, I think she really recognized, because I was doing plays in school and one of my early productions, I remember she came and I had never seen her look at me that way. I think it was the moment that she realized that I had found something that was going to occupy really so much of my heart and life, you know? And that she would do anything to
make it happen,
and to support me, and to never make me feel pressure to always. I mean, she really is one of the people that really helped me be able to define success in these spaces on my own terms, and not by anything outwardly, you know, not by accolades or even by the jobs I get, but just the bravery that it takes to pursue something that's really hard, where the odds are such that you might not have, like, quote, success, but to do it because it's really what's inside of you. And I think my mom really gave me that in spades. And then separately, I think, as someone that grew up, you know, I remember, and I think her father was just trying to give her the best odds, but for example, suggesting that maybe she change her name on a resume to sound less ethnic because it might help her get jobs. And in fact, it did. It worked. He was not wrong, you know, in the 1980s. But I think my mom really wanting to make sure that for me, that I didn't feel like I had to make any concessions of self, that I could show up exactly as I was, and she did it in really small ways. For example, I remember very early on wanting to straighten my hair, to get my hair chemically straightened. And my mom was very sweet and very generous. And she's like, we can investigate the whole process and do it. And we investigated everything. I had had like a series of very terrible blowouts that the weather didn't agree with. And she was like, whatever makes you happy. But she outlined everything for me. And finally, it was my choice. I said, no, I want to keep my hair just like this. And I remember when I made that choice, she cried because she was so happy. But she had given the choice to me, you know. And I think that was just an early indication that was so helpful for me then when I navigated Hollywood and eventually was on sets where people deeply decided that I had to straighten my hair or that I had to look one way or another. My mom gave me an early sense of self enough that that I, you know, could say, no, actually, I want to look like myself. And I'm not sure that I would have known how to do that were it not for my mother.
You know what I also note based on what you shared about your mother, and in particular that speech you gave at that women's luncheon where you said, I want to acknowledge this woman who's not in the room. I mean, oftentimes when we're talking about your identity, it is really focused on your Blackness.
Yeah.
But you are biracial, and your mother is white and Mexican. And so she's really not in the rooms when we talk about Black discourse. But this sounds like she was such a fundamental part in you understanding who you are.
Yeah. And also I think she did a really phenomenal job at raising a mixed race daughter and like connecting me to my Black identity and making sure that I was like in those spaces and taking me out of private schools that were completely white, where I was the only kid of color in there on scholarship, and understanding that like what that felt like, you know.
You were even homeschooled for a while.
Yeah,
right?
because I was in a school system that frankly was racist and not great, and I was bullied in that school, and she understood how detrimental that was to me at a very young age, and we didn't have the money to get to a better school district, and so she took me out of school and homeschooled me until we could. Because she knew that school wouldn't protect me and she couldn't be there every day to do that, and so she thought, I'll take you home and I'll protect you here.
Yay for moms.
Yay for moms.
I talked about you sending that tape to Tyler Perry. You also did something similar with Dear White People. You, in this case, wrote a letter to the director and showrunner, Justin Simien, a letter where you described how much of a fan you were of the actual work and that you needed to be in the movie. This is a pattern.
Do you know what's so funny? It's just the other day I was thinking I need to write more letters to people, not in an effort to get a job, just to tell them how much I love their work, because I'm such a massive fan.
Yep.
And work means so much to me, and I'll watch something that I love and it'll swirl around forever and ever. And I want to send these sort of missives to people just to let them know. I think of myself as someone that doesn't write letters, but you're reminding me, I suppose I am. I read Dear White People at a time when I almost wanted to quit.
Quit the industry.
Yes! And I hadn't really been working in it arguably that long, but I just thought, there's not enough for me here. There's not enough that's substantive. And frankly, some of the things that I'm going up for or would be offered, were I lucky enough to get them, I think are like problematic in terms of what they say about us. And I don't know if I want to do it anymore. And then I got this script, and it felt like for the first time I could play a character that was not just the object of the narrative, but the subject of the narrative, which was massive.
And that's interesting distinction there.
Huge.
Because I think that for the average viewer, it's not until you say it that there's an understanding of what you mean. It's so deeply embedded in art and cinema, being an object versus being the subject.
The subject, yes. And by the way, there are amazing roles that you can play where you are somewhat an object, which means your character functions but is not the protagonist, is not the subject that the audience or the filmmaker frankly cares the most about. But at that point in my career, I had never, with the exception of maybe my first job on Cold Case, got to be the subject. And even then, she really is an object because she's just a cold case, that you're trying to figure out in the past, right? So it was remarkable to have the opportunity to play that kind of character. And then also, Justin Simien wanted to sort of, it was an indictment of Hollywood itself in some ways, about the kind of things that we're allowed to be on screen as Black folks, and that was something I so deeply felt and had so many feelings about that I didn't even get to process, because anytime I was working, it was sort of like, you're just happy to be there, you're happy to have a job, but secretly I was feeling a lot of turmoil about what was possible for me, and particularly coming from the theater where you play these incredible
expansive
parts. I mean, my first professional play, I was playing Juliet in Romeo and Juliet. You play these things that you get to sink your whole humanity into, and then to feel like it's mitigated to this sort of tiny, and in very many cases, especially early in my career and at that time in Hollywood, sort of superficial or stereotypical versions of
yes,
a woman, of a Black woman in particular. I just felt I was tired.
It's such
frankly.
yeah. It's such a refreshing dynamic satirical. It was also one of your first times you've done satire, right?
Yeah, and satire is increasingly rare. So I just loved the script and sort of died for it, and it felt like that thing that I just knew I had to play that part. I knew that I had to play that part.
Dear White People is set on a college campus. You play a college student, a biracial student who has a radio show, and she's kind of militant. She's also dealing with her own internalized feelings about her identity and is kind of confronted by it in various different ways, both by being a person of color on campus and a majority white campus, but also from Black people, other Black people who question her Blackness. And it's about people of color on a campus and dealing with race and identity. What did you love about the part that you played the most?
Well, as I told you, I love playing someone that works in radio journalism. I just found that so fun and so fascinating. But I also thought all the host of kind of contradictions inside of Samantha White were just so fun to play. And truthfully, as impactful as it is, race is silly.
And I can imagine you, I can imagine you as a biracial person able to see this more than anyone. Like you're able to see, do you feel that way?
Oh, that's interesting. Maybe perhaps it gives me a slightly different lens. Yeah, maybe. Because, like growing up, you hear things like this idea that you could talk white. Like what does that
mean?
even mean? It's so bizarre. It's so bizarre. And so I think also getting to kind of talk about race inside of a movie that is on one hand taking it very seriously and also identifying how unserious it really is.
Yeah, that's the fun part.
That's the fun part.
Yeah.
And that's, for my money personally, I think that's the kind of discourse I'm interested in with regards to race,
I want to ask you this question only because we may find a clip later, but is there a particular scene or something that was the most fun for you to shoot on that?
Oh, goodness. There's so many fun scenes. And as I said, I haven't seen the film in quite a long time, but there's a confrontation that I have with Kyle Gallagher, who plays sort of the villain. He's the head of this group on campus called Pastiche. Yeah, yes. And there's some fun sort of tit for tat inside of there. And then also there's another scene that I have with my sort of secret partner. I'm secretly in love with a white TA
guy
on campus, but I can't because he's going to mess up my standing with the Black Student Union. But there's an argument that we have that essentially is foreplay. They have a lot of discourse about race, but really what they want to get to is connection. And I think there's something kind of sweet about that, because the truth is sometimes we can get so mired in identity that it gets us further away, not just from ourselves, but from each other. And I think there's something about this scene that sort of illustrates that.
Because this TA, actually, this white TA, he really sees her.
He does.
Mm-hmm.
He does really see her.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. He's the only one that does. I mean, she secretly also loves Taylor Swift,
right.
And can't. and how silly.
Is it?
How
yes.
silly. But I remember being in high school, and I am an avid, lifelong fan of Joni Mitchell.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember certain people being like, Joni Mitchell? That's what you're listening to? I mean, I was also listening to Tupac, but this idea that I couldn't reconcile that, or my peers had a hard time reconciling that we had to exist in these binaries that had to do with race is always so silly, except in high school I couldn't see it yet. It just felt like, terrifying. It felt like I had to, code switch depending on where I was to be able to fit in, because of course as a teenager that's your desperate desire. But the truth is you never really find yourself or the people or your village until you can integrate all the varied things about yourself.
Do you revisit your old work? Like, have you
No.
revisited that
No.
particular film?
No, I haven't seen it.
I will say, Tessa, I loved it when it came out. I saw it many times. It felt different watching it in 2025.
Really? In what sense?
It still held up.
Oh, wow.
It was still strong.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
But we're in a different place.
Yeah.
Back then, I mean, it was the tail end of the Obama era, and we were kind of we were naming things in a very intentional way. And there was also a bit of optimism in being able to name for many people.
Sure.
And to watch that, just thinking about something like that being created today, do you think it could be?
No. I don't think so. Not in the same way, no. I think there was a run, and Dear White People was sort of early in it, but I think there was a run of really extraordinary projects, American films that wanted to talk about race in really inventive ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was a really generative time, that sort of maybe culminated in the brilliance of a film like Get Out. And I think of like cinema, to me it's like cinema before Get Out and after Get Out in terms of what that film did, what that film told us you could do, what was possible, that you could take the genre space and speak about race or class, and now we've seen many films that do that in very different ways. But I think Dear White People was sort of on the early end. I don't know. I think that these things are sort of like a pendulum and things come back around. And this time will probably give birth to a whole welcomed rash of projects.
You're optimistic.
I am optimistic. I am. I love, in the same way that I love stories that are audacious, I love storytellers that are audacious, I love people, full stop, that are audacious. I think one of the most audacious things currently is to be optimistic. And so I try to be.
Something interesting about you is you have, you may have more, but I don't know this, but you have 2 tattoos. One that is a yes.
Yes.
And then one that's a no.
Yes. The yes is bigger and more visible to audiences than the no is. But, I got the yes first, and then many years later, I thought I needed to get the no for good measure. But I think, and they're on separate arms, I do think I'm constantly wrestling with that. I think I wrestle with my cynicism and my optimism. I think they're always in
because that's what they
a bit
represent.
Of a tussle. Yeah.
There's the optimism and there's the cynicism.
Yeah.
But why did the cynicism need to happen a few years later with the no after this big declarative yes?
Yes. It was a reminder to myself that we are as much defined by the things that we don't do than by the things that we do, and I think I needed to be reminded to say no. I think I'm partially, because of my optimism and boundless energy, I'm someone that's inclined to say yes. And also, I think in this industry, there is a perceived feeling of scarcity. And so I think you're constantly kind of like, what's next? And sometimes it breeds a yes that maybe should have been a very polite no.
What was the impetus for the yes, though? I want to know. What's the story behind the yes?
Okay, so I've never bothered to look this up to make sure that it's a true story. But ever since I heard this story, I was so taken by it. Apparently, the way that John Lennon met Yoko Ono.
Oh, yeah.
She was in a group show.
Yeah.
And the piece was this white ladder that you could walk up. Mm-hmm. And on a ceiling was a magnifying glass that was hanging from it. And you could find a very, very, very tiny yes. And John Lennon was so taken by the piece and said, whose piece is this? And it was Yoko Ono's. And that's how they met. And I always loved this story. I just love the imagery. I think I'm also a romantic at heart, but this idea of art connecting people in the most profound ways, that you could understand something fundamental about another in a piece of work. So I loved that. And I love this idea that if you look close enough, it might be tiny, but there are little yeses everywhere, which is to say there is so much to be affirmed by if we look close enough. And I just love that. And because I am also a very impulsive person, I heard that story and then rushed to get a tattoo. In the same way, I have a number 5 that is taken from a Kerry James Marshall painting. I went to see his work at his retrospective. I knew his work, was already a fan, but to see so much of his work in person, I wept the whole time and then immediately went to a tattoo parlor and got it tattooed on me. I have more than 2 tattoos, and most of them are very impulsive.
And I would guess it doesn't even matter about whether that story is true or not.
No.
With Yoko Ono and Lennon, your yes is kind of your mantra.
Exactly.
It is, yeah.
Exactly.
Can you show us your tattoo?
Yes.
Yes. And I'd like, yeah.
Let me see if I can.
They're so elegant, too.
They are. They're tiny. I'm a wimp. Okay, here's the note.
Oh, the note, yes. Why did you choose these places? Is there a particular reason?
I don't know, because I thought this one is kind of for me, and this one I thought the yes is not just for me but for other. I thought it's a cheerful tattoo for people to get to engage with. You know, it's a bit of like positivity to send, but this is kind of closer to me.
And is that a heart?
This is an anatomical heart, but it also is, there's these Mexican game called Loteria, and it's a card game, and so this is one of the cards, one of my favorite ones.
Do you speak Spanish?
I do, but I need work. It's been a long time. Yeah.
Just thinking about like how meaningful that is for your mom and for your legacy, you know, for you to take it on.
Yeah, it is. And my mom has been doing all this incredible ancestral work and connecting to members of her family that she had lost touch with, and doing trips to Mexico and really trying to unpack and uncover her relationship, not just with her family there, but with that part of herself, which has been just wonderful to watch.
Tessa Thompson, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you.
The pleasure's been all mine. Thanks so much for having me.